The lost city of Atlantis may have actually been found. No, really. Two researchers were working in the waters off the coast of Cuba when they discovered the ruins of what looked like an ancient submerged city. That happened about 20 years ago, and yet no one really talks about it today. It's like the authorities just took the research, locked it away in some top-secret room, and decided no one else should know about it. But why? Well, I'm going to tell you. Back in 2001, Paulina Zalitsky, a marine engineer, and her husband, Paul Weinswig, were hired to explore the waters off Cuba's western coast. They had two main objectives: to search for old shipwrecks, possibly hiding treasures like gold and jewels, and to locate valuable oil and natural gas deposits deep underwater. They were using a sonar. Basically, this equipment is like a sound-based radar. It sends out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something, like a sunken ship, they bounce back. The system can figure out where and how far the object is just by listening to the echo. So, the couple was scanning the seafloor with this equipment more than 2,000 feet below the surface. And then, out of nowhere, they found something way more interesting than gold or oil. They found stones. Not just any stones. I'm talking huge, perfectly arranged stones. Kind of like a mini version of the pyramid at Chichen Itza. Or even better, like a bunch of tiny submerged Chichen Itzas. Yep, they saw that. Or at least, they think they did. The thing is, sonar doesn't work like a camera. It definitely doesn't record video or take actual pictures underwater. What it does do is create images using sound. And those images are usually just outlines or shapes, kind of like a blurry black and white sketch. It shows you where things are, but not exactly what they look like. And that's exactly what happened back then. The equipment started producing images of these perfectly organized stone structures, and it really looked like some kind of urban development. I mean, the site was just too organized, too symmetrical to be just random rocks. But it sounded too good to be true. I mean, this discovery could totally change everything we know about ancient civilizations on the American continent. So the scientists decided it would be too irresponsible to announce anything without finding more evidence first. And that's why they decided to go back to that same spot. This time they sent down an underwater remotely operated vehicle to actually see what was going on beneath the sea. See? This robot was basically an underwater cameraman. And yep, it confirmed it. There was definitely something strange down there. It looked like an ancient city made of huge, smooth blocks of granite. These rocks were about 8 feet by 10 feet. Some were in pyramid shapes, others were circular. Some seemed to be deliberately cut and then stacked on top of each other, while others appeared isolated from the rest. Together, they looked like they were forming corridors and outlines of rooms. It was like finding large buildings in the middle of an underwater desert. These images were enough for Zalitsky to seal the deal. Back then, she confirmed that this amazing structure, her words, could have been a large urban center. Again, her words. Then the couple started to speculate. They said that these structures were probably built more than 6,000 years ago, which would make them older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. It's even older than the famous Maya, the civilization that used to live in the Americas and is known for their ancient and advanced temples. The research also suggested that these structures might belong to a civilization that lived on the American continent thousands of years ago, and that we didn't even know about. This supposed civilization once thrived on a 100-mile land bridge connecting Cuba to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But then, something catastrophic happened. According to their theory, the Earth's faults shifted beneath the surface, leading to a massive earthquake. Then, in the blink of an eye, the entire bridge was destroyed. The land was swallowed up by the sea and ended up at the bottom of the ocean, and this civilization disappeared. Of course, all the connections to the famous Atlantis myth got the media totally hooked on the story. News websites ran headlines like "Lost City of the Caribbean Found" and "Atlantis Found in Cuba." So, could that really be Atlantis? I mean, did they finally find the remains of this supposedly super advanced and lost civilization? Well, it's hard to say. From the start, part of the scientific community wasn't buying into the story too much. First, there's the issue of the date. Saying that this civilization existed at this spot at least 6,000 years ago just wasn't very credible. Then some European archaeologists argued that the stones they found using sonar might just be natural limestone, not perfectly sculpted granite. And third, it was too deep. Even with the whole theory of earth faults opening up and swallowing everything, it's still hard to explain how an entire city ended up so deep in the ocean. For comparison, there is Heraklion, a real ancient Egyptian port city that got submerged. Today, it is only about 19 feet underwater. But this so-called Atlantis city is at depths between 2,000 and 2,460 feet. See how that's totally different, right? People think it would have taken around 50,000 years for such stone structures to sink to the depth where they are said to be found. And according to experts, none of the known civilizations from that long ago had the ability to build such structures. But for Zalitsky, yes, it was possible. She still believed in the fault theory to explain how this land ended up at the bottom of the ocean so fast. Big movements of the Earth's tectonic plates are usually followed by things like volcanoes and earthquakes. So, according to her, it's a powerful event, and the island sinking could have happened really quickly. This earthquake theory could also explain why some of the megaliths on the seafloor look organized while others don't. But to really prove any of this, they needed a specially designed robot to go down there again and take samples of the rocks and sediment. That way, they could figure out how old the rocks were and maybe even find signs of human life, like carvings, sculptures, or artifacts. The problem is, drilling into those structures isn't easy. They look like granite, and drilling granite that deep underwater is seriously tough. And more than anything, they needed money to do it, a lot of it. So maybe they just never got the funding. Because even with all that initial hype, no further explorations or studies were ever reported. And that lack of follow-up sparked a lot of speculation. Some people even wondered if the story got shut down on purpose, like maybe the authorities wanted to keep something top secret. As if this underwater city was built by some kind of higher extraterrestrial being, and they just don't want us to find out. But truth be told, the strongest argument for saying, yeah, that is definitely a lost city, is that nature supposedly couldn't have built something so symmetrical. Geologists did try to find natural explanations, or at least similar examples from other parts of the world, but they came up short. Still, just because we haven't found a clear natural explanation doesn't mean there isn't one. Nature can create some pretty wild and unexpected stuff, so honestly, that whole too perfect to be natural angle is kind of a weak argument. What most likely happened is that experts just weren't convinced it was actually a sunken city, and that's probably why no one followed up on their work. Over time, the buzz faded, the story disappeared, and the site slipped back into silence. And without more data, the true nature of those underwater formations off Cuba's coast is still a mystery.
You have about $130 million. What would you do with it? Fly into space or buy an island? There are many ways you can spend this much money, but one anonymous investor used it to build an extravagant underwater city. The project is not finished yet, and a lot of people are currently working really hard to make this crazy idea come to life. If all goes well, in the near future, living under the sea may become a reality. In the past century, there was a limestone quarry near the Welsh border in England. In the 1990s, it became flooded and turned into a lake 260 feet deep. Now, there's a large construction project going on around it. Trucks transport materials and people in overalls construct huge modules that look like giant futuristic submarines. These modules are called sentinels, and they will become the buildings of a small underwater city. Builders and engineers create durable stainless steel materials that allow these houses to withstand a depth of up to 650 feet. This is the upper limit of the twilight zone, where very little sunlight penetrates. Large squid and other creatures live in this zone. Imagine waking up in an underwater hotel room and seeing a giant squid staring at you from the dark. Or even worse, you see a huge eye watching you as you wake up. This could happen if sentinels were successfully installed in the depths of the ocean. Meanwhile, let's return to our project on a small lake. The project is called Deep. Its goal is to make life underwater as comfortable as possible. Inside living modules, builders install bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms, and observation windows. People will access them using small submarines. However, it's not as simple as calling a taxi. To live underwater, you need to train under the guidance of experienced instructors to test yourself in underwater life simulators. The cost of living there will likely be expensive, but it's worth it. At least you will be well fed. A chef will develop a special menu, and all food will be stored in vacuum-sealed bags to preserve its flavor and nutrients. It all sounds great, but there's a question. Who is financing this project? No one knows the answer. Deep is funded by a secret investor who has already spent more than $100 million. Interestingly, this is not the first attempt to create an underwater dwelling. For example, Jacques-Yves Cousteau, a famous diver explorer, first created the Conshelf 1 underwater house in 1962. This was a steel cylinder located at a depth of 30 feet, where 2 divers lived for a week. In 1970, several women also spent 14 days underwater in the Caribbean Sea at a depth of 50 feet. The aim of that project was to study human psychology in a cramped environment, similar to that of a spaceship. Unsurprisingly, that project was partly funded by NASA. Okay, we have windows overlooking marine life, delicious food, underwater parties, and solitude away from civilization. All these things sound cool, but if we put aside the fun part for a moment, is there any real benefit to it? Oh yeah, ocean exploration. Many marine biologists believe that the best way to explore the ocean is from within. Diving doesn't help much since divers are limited by time and body needs. They can stay underwater for only about an hour and a half at a time. Underwater cities could allow us to live underwater for months. But the most important thing is long-term observation of marine life in its natural habitat. In the mid-1990s, a group of researchers wanted to study the development and nutrition of corals. They brought them to the lab for testing and found out that corals reacted differently to tests in artificial environments than in the ocean. Their behavior in a laboratory setting was different from their behavior in the wild. Underwater cities could also provide work for archaeologists who study the remains of ships that have sunk throughout history. Plus, such cities could help protect us from future disasters. In the event of a catastrophe like an earthquake, tsunami, or volcanic eruption, scientists and engineers could build water-based shelters like the Sub-Biosphere 2 project to provide refuge for people. These circular structures could sink into the ocean and give shelter for up to 50 or 100 people, allowing them to wait out the disaster from a safe distance. Underwater cities could be an excellent solution to overpopulation, but there are some downsides. We already pollute the world's oceans, and what if we literally lived inside them? It's one thing to use labs to study marine life, but it's another to build hotels for vacationers. One such hotel, called the Water Discus, is a building at a depth of no more than 32 feet. It will have 21 rooms and a restaurant with coral reef views. While the conditions seem comfortable, some experts worry that staying there for long periods could be harmful because of the lack of sunlight. Nevertheless, it would be interesting to stay there for a week and see how it feels. The most challenging aspect of creating such laboratories, hotels, and bunkers is ensuring a reliable life support and safety system. It's crucial that the air, humidity, and temperature be as comfortable as possible for people to live in these structures. However, this requires a significant amount of energy. Currently, all modern underwater buildings rely on external sources of energy located on the surface. But scientists plan to make future underwater projects fully autonomous, using kinetic energy from waves and powerful solar panels to generate power. It's also important to create the right structure for these buildings. Rather than covering an underwater city with a giant bubble, it's more efficient to create several large housing modules. Each module should consist of steel, glass, and special cement. Also, the depth shouldn't exceed 1,000 feet, since a deeper location would require thicker walls because of high water pressure. To load and move these residential modules safely, engineers can use ballast tanks. These are large containers filled with water, which are used to pull the modules down deep into the ocean. Once in place, engineers can release the water from the tanks and fill them with air, causing the house to float back to the surface. And what about fresh air? Fish extract oxygen from the water using their gills, but this method is obviously not suitable for humans. Therefore, we need to deliver air from the surface. It can be piped into the city and mixed with a special substance called sodazorb, which reacts with carbon dioxide and removes it. It would be great if we could generate oxygen inside our underwater cities rather than relying on other sources. This would require farms and plants that can produce oxygen through photosynthesis. But instead of sunlight, these plants would use artificial light. If we talk about complete autonomy, people could get food from the water at any moment, put on scuba gear, a mask, and an oxygen tank, and leave the hotel through an airlock. Use harpoons and fishing nets to catch dinner. Remember to check your oxygen reserves and don't swim for too long. Frying fish in a pan won't work because of strong odors. In an underwater dwelling, air is static like in an airplane cabin, so odors become stronger. Maybe in the future, engineers will create a dedicated cooking area, but for now, you'll have to rely on canned and dehydrated food. If you get bored, go for an underwater walk. Instead of carrying oxygen tanks, use hollow tubes connecting your mask to an air source inside your home. But don't forget that you can't go too far because the length of the tube is limited. Air, food, safe construction. What else? Drinking water. In the future, scientists may create filters in these hotels that desalinate salt water. This water can be extracted from the condensation inside the hotel, as well as from human secretions. Don't be surprised. Astronauts, for example, have been using special technology to filter their liquids and turn them into drinking water for a long time.
Well, this eerie Lake Huron discovery may be that it possibly contains the remnants of an entire civilization. Whoa, wait, sounds like Atlantis, right? Well, not exactly. But if there really had been an ancient underwater civilization here, it must have been a pretty advanced one. Around 10,000 years ago, two sharp glassy flakes broke off a stone tool and landed on the ground unnoticed. They stayed buried there for thousands of years, until 2013. Then scientists pulled up a small chunk of mud, about the size of a milk carton, from the bottom of Lake Huron, 100 feet underwater. Inside the mud, they found those same two flakes made of obsidian, a shiny black volcanic glass that forms when lava cools quickly. After careful testing, they realized these flakes came from Central Oregon, which is quite a distance, about 2,500 miles away. They found this prehistoric Great Lakes site on the Alpena Amberley Ridge, an underwater landform that once connected what's now Michigan and Ontario. Back then, it was dry land. Early humans used it to build traps for animals like caribou as the Ice Age faded and the Great Lakes began to form. Now, obsidian was the high-tech material of ancient times. It's super sharp and perfect for making tools. If you study the flakes carefully, it's obvious that humans made them. You can see where they struck them and the feathered edges that come from being carefully chipped. That means people were not only crafting tools here, but they also had access to obsidian that came from incredibly far away. It was likely possible through a huge trade network that spanned across the continent. For over 100 years, people have guessed that ancient societies might have existed beneath the Great Lakes, but no one had proof. That's why work on this submerged archaeological site is so important. A team of researchers has been trying to learn more about the 10,000-year-old ruins and the civilization that left them behind for over a decade now. Lake Huron's icy water acted like a time capsule that helped preserve things for thousands of years. So far, researchers have found not only unique stone tools, but also ancient trees with roots still intact and underwater peat bogs that preserved seeds and leaves. It was like an Ice Age version of Pompeii, a scene frozen in time. These discoveries are also helping scientists create new technologies and ways to do underwater archaeology. They've engaged sonars, underwater robots, and divers so far. Now, it's pretty cool that the tools they found on the Alpina Amberley Ridge were way smaller than other tools from the same era found nearby. That might mean a different group of people lived here, and they had their own unique way of life. Even the peat bogs they found, which are about 9,500 years old, hold secrets. They're full of pine needles, seeds, and leaves that could reveal what the environment was like back then. Usually stuff like this breaks down quickly on land, but the cold freshwater preserved it. The Michigan team is working with scientists in Cambridge, England, to extract DNA from the remains. If it works, it could finally confirm what animals lived there, and maybe even more. There are still years of discovery on this prehistoric Great Lakes site ahead. Another famous submerged archaeological site is the lost city of Pavlo-Petri. Archaeologists think it is the oldest sunken city in the world they've found and made official so far. Pavlo-Petri is around 5,000 years old. That means it existed even before the legendary Greek heroes in Homer's stories. Scientists first spotted it way back in 1904, and then mostly forgot about it until 1967, when Nicholas Fleming rediscovered it. He described it as a Bronze Age city now lying under about 10 to 13 feet of water. A year later, he returned with a team of scientists to study the ruins. Over 6 weeks, using just hand tapes and a basic grid, they managed to map out the city. They found that it covered almost 1,000 feet by 500 feet and had at least 15 buildings, courtyards, 5 streets, 2 tombs, and around 37 small stone graves. They also found signs that the ruins continued onto the nearby island of Pavlo-Petri itself. They dug up some amazing pottery, obsidian, and chert blades, and even a tiny bronze figurine that may date all the way back to 2800 BCE. Most of the buildings, though, came from the period between 1650 and 1180 BCE. Then scientists left the site alone again until 2009, when a super team of researchers launched a new 5-year project to really dive deep into the history of Pavlo-Petri. This time, they had digital mapping tools and better diving equipment, so they could explore and even excavate underwater. They found another 97,000 square feet of buildings, including a large hall and hidden streets. Plus, they dug up even more pottery that showed people had been living in the city from about 3000 BCE to 1100 BCE, and that the city once had a population of 500 to 2,000 people. No one knows for sure how the city ended up underwater, but many scientists think it was because of an earthquake, maybe around 1000 BCE, or even as late as 375 CE. Because it's the oldest underwater city ever found, some people even believe Pavlo-Petri might have inspired the legend of Atlantis. Another contestant for the Atlantis title lies near Japan. Back in 1986, a local diver was exploring the waters near the Ryukyu Islands when he found a giant structure made of perfectly shaped steps and sharp edges. It was 82 feet underwater. Today, the Yonaguni Monument is one of the most mysterious underwater sites on the planet. The structure is nearly half a football field in size. It looks like a massive stone pyramid with layers of platforms and steps stacked one on top of another. No one really knows where it came from or who built it. Some experts think the monument might be more than 10,000 years old, which would make it older than the Egyptian pyramids. One theory is that it could be the last remains of a lost civilization called Mu, a mythical Pacific society kind of like Atlantis. Others believe an ancient culture that lived in Japan as early as 12,000 BCE might have built it. But many scientists and geologists are skeptical about this possible underwater ancient civilization, even though Yonaguni has narrow passageways, arched openings, and right angles that almost look like city blocks. They say that the site looks a lot like natural rock formations, like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, for example. The whole monument is still connected to a bigger chunk of bedrock, which means it wasn't built piece by piece. And the way the layers of rock are stacked probably has more to do with earthquakes and tectonic movement. It's located in the very active Pacific Ring of Fire. One marine geologist kept going back down there, and every time he found something new. He says he spotted tool marks in the rock, symbols carved into stone faces, and even rock formations shaped like animals. He believes these carvings point to a culture that came from mainland Asia. He said he had identified 10 different structures off Yonaguni, including a ruined castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and even a huge museum. These buildings seem to be connected by roads and channels, and some parts are surrounded by what could be giant stone walls. The explorer believes the city is at least 5,000 years old, based on stalactites found in underwater caves nearby, which would have only formed after the caves flooded. His supporters say they have never seen an earthquake create shapes like this, above or below water. But skeptics blame it all on erosion and insist that whirling underwater currents and sea creatures left holes in the rock. Now, if you want to form your own opinion about it, the spot is open for visitors, and it's definitely a super fun diving experience. Being afraid of the ocean is a very understandable fear. We have it in our genes. In the past, humans had to avoid certain dangerous situations, like big animals and deep bodies of water, in order to survive. Plus, we've only explored 5% of the oceans, so we never know what we can stumble upon there. In regular conditions, GoPro is just a camera. But if you find it lying at the bottom of a 400-foot pit in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, that will make your blood run cold. I know 400 feet may not seem like much, but a person who is deep diving for fun usually can swim from 59 to 98 feet deep only, unless they're a professional diver. But say you made it to that pit and retrieved that GoPro. That would have still been fatal to you. In this specific hole where the camera was found, there would be a layer of hydrogen sulfide, a very dangerous and foul-smelling gas, at the mark of 300 feet. The gadget was 100 feet lower, alongside its owners, 2 long-lost explorers. To this day, very few people manage to dive this deep and go back unscraped. In fact, the deceased explorers were found only with the help of submarines. Now, you might be curious about the content of the GoPro. In stories like this, we expect proof of foul play or sinister footage. But the only thing found there were the images of happy times the explorers had during their trip. A sad ending to a vacay. Now, in deep waters, you can also find many species that seem to be otherworldly, but in a cute and interesting way, like the alien sponge. This fun little fella is a sponge first seen near the Mariana Trench in 2016. It's actually part of an ecosystem dubbed Forest of the Weird. Okay, this makes it sound a bit creepy. And what adds to the weirdness is the fact that the alien sponge had 2 little holes that resemble little eyes, so like it's peeking at you. Ah, another fun fact? The skeleton of this type of sponge is made of glass. And if you're afraid of cockroaches, I'll let you take a deep breath here. Ready? Cool. Because on the ocean floor, there are more than 20 different types of giant isopods, beetle lookalikes, that can be as big as 14 inches. Yikes! But fear not, these guys usually roam the ocean floor for food. So, unless you dive 7,000 feet, which we've just seen is not possible, you won't run into them. Now, despite the horror movie name, the bloody belly comb jelly is actually a fascinating creature you can also find in the ocean. They live in the twilight zone of the ocean, which is between 820 and 4,900 feet below sea level. Pretty far from where you usually soak your feet. But what's so cool about this jelly is its color. Because in the twilight zone, the light is very scarce. Many animals either emit a faint glow, like the anglerfish, or create a camouflage. The jelly here is blood red because, in the pitch-black darkness of the ocean, other animals won't see it digesting colorful bioluminescent prey inside its stomach. Besides, the jelly has a row of combs that spark a very beautiful iridescent light. Beautiful and lethal. Humans also have their fair share of contribution to the weird fest that is the ocean floor. Depending on where you swim, You might just find parts of rocket engines used during the Apollo program. Now, when a rocket is launched into space, parts of it are dropped into the ocean where it runs out of propellant, making the rocket itself lighter. And a part of the Apollo 11 rocket engine, yes, that one that first took humans to land on the moon, was actually recovered from the ocean after more than 4 decades. And you can see it at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. Not a space fan? Well, there's something for the Oregon Trail lovers too. There are 2 locomotives living their best lives, or worst, depending on your point of view, just off the coast of New Jersey. They're from the 1850s and are sitting under 90 feet of water. They probably fell off of a transportation ship during a rough storm, or were intentionally pushed over the barge so that the ship didn't sink. Most of these things can only be seen while diving, but worry not. Even if you have a lingering fear of the deep ocean, you can still find weird things by simply walking on the beach. Look at these bizarre Garfield landline phones washed away in Brittany, France. The French have been having bizarre encounters with the sarcastic orange cat since the 80s, and it took about 30 years for French farmer René Morvan to come forward with a simple explanation. A shipping container with Garfield merchandise got stranded in the sea, only to find its final resting place in a sea cave. We bet Brittany locals are still haunted by the creepy smile of that landline phone. And just like a storm uncovered the Garfield secret stash, it also moved a few ships that sank more than 600 years ago. But this is not a simple Titanic story. It actually sounds more like Pirates of the Caribbean, because when the storm moved those old ships, authorities from Caesarea found 2,000 gold coins, some silver and bronze coins, gemstones, and rings. It was a bigger treasure than a dragon could hoard. But don't get your hopes up. Even though most of the underwater archaeological zones in this region are open to divers, these treasures are safely tucked away in a museum. Speaking of pirates, and I was, another weird thing you can find chillin' in the ocean is the pirate city of Port Royal, Jamaica. In 1692, the city was devastated by an earthquake, followed by a tsunami. A really bad twofer. But the good news is, you can still visit it today, well, scuba diving, that is. This is actually not the only sunken city in the world. There's also Thonis Heracleion in Egypt, which is not at the bottom of the sea per se, but at the mouth of the Nile River. There's also Baiae, a Roman town built atop a supervolcano. Now, you might be thinking Baiae had the same fate as Pompeii, but guess what? The floor actually sank and the town went down with it. So, have you ever heard of underwater crop circles? Back in 1995, divers in Japan spotted perfectly round circles formed in the sand. They were 6 feet in diameter and looked like those crop circles from sci-fi movies. Scientists simply couldn't figure out what or who did it until they caught the culprit red-handed, a tiny male pufferfish only 4 inches long. This little guy uses its body and fins to draw circles and squiggles and decorates his creation with seashells and corals. It takes the fish about a week to do so. All this hard work is part of a mating ritual, and if a female pufferfish likes the art, she will lay her eggs there, right in the center. The circular design of the underwater crop circle actually channels fresh water to the middle of the circle, the ideal scenario for the eggs to develop. And guess what? After she lays the eggs, the female pufferfish leaves, and it's the male that tends the eggs. But just in case fishes are not your thing, we can also offer you a cargo of rubber duckies, turtles, beavers, and frogs. 28,000 of them to be exact. These bath toys were traveling from China to the US, but much like our friend Garfield, were caught in a storm in 1992. From the North Pacific, our friendly duckies and beavers made their way to the UK by 2007. But some were bolder and traveled to Australia, Indonesia, Chile, Hawaii, and even Alaska. Now, have you ever seen a strange thing washed up by the beach? Let us know in the comments. Bye.
Waves are crashing higher than ever before, about to swallow one of the world's most mysterious islands. By 2080, rising seas could crash all the way up to Ahu Tongariki. It's the famous ceremonial platform on Rapa Nui, aka Easter Island. Unfortunately, that's not just a guess. Researchers at the University of Hawaii at Manoa have already run the numbers and shared their findings in the Journal of Cultural Heritage. Their study shows that up to 51 other cultural landmarks, including the iconic Moai statues, could face flooding. But before we get to all that drama, let's learn more about Rapa Nui itself. This is the original name of Easter Island. People from Polynesia settled there way back, around 300 CE. Once they made themselves comfortable, they started creating their own wild and creative culture. Between the 10th and 16th centuries, they built massive ceremonial platforms called ahu and huge statues called moai, made to honor ancestors. Those giant figures still stand today, giving the island a mysterious vibe. Rapa Nui National Park protects all this. It's a Chilean wildlife area, the heart of Rapa Nui culture. The architecture and sculptures here are totally unique, even compared to other Polynesian islands. Easter Island is super remote, literally the farthest inhabited island in the world, sitting 2,300 miles from mainland Chile. The island covers 64 square miles, and the World Heritage Site takes up about 27 square miles, including 4 tiny nearby islets. Rapa Nui National Park is full of archaeological treasures. Experts estimate there are about 900 moai, more than 300 ahu, and thousands of other structures for farming, funerals, houses, and daily life. The moai are incredible. Some stand 6.5 feet tall. Others reach almost 66 feet. Most were carved from yellow-brown lava using simple basalt tools called toki. Some moai were still being carved. Some were being moved to their final ahu, and some were torn down and re-erected. The quarries, like Rano Raraku, show us today how the carvings were made. The ahu come in all shapes and sizes. The biggest is Ahu Tongariki, with 15 moai lined up on top of it. Most ahu have a raised platform of carefully worked stones, a ramp, often paved with smooth beach pebbles, and a flat area in front. Rock art is everywhere. You can find pictographs and petroglyphs in all kinds of styles. Caves hide even more carvings. Even villages, farms, and other structures are super interesting. By the 16th century, according to studies, the Rapa Nui society faced a big crisis. Natural resources ran low. The culture started to change. Many of the megalithic monuments were ruined. The ancestor cult was replaced by the man-bird cult. It was centered in Orongo by the Ranokau volcano. There are 54 semi-underground stone houses there, all shaped like ellipses and decorated with carvings about birds and fertility. This cult lasted until the mid-19th century. It's probably no wonder that colonization brought huge changes. Livestock, forced relocation, and diseases cut the native population to barely over 100 people. Today, the island is home to descendants of the original Rapa Nui people as well as immigrants. They try to keep the culture and still live in the modern world. Sadly, all that heritage might be lost soon, for good. And if nothing is done, rising seas could put Rapa Nui's UNESCO World Heritage status at risk. Scientists say that knowing these risks are just the first step. If we actually realize what's happening, we can figure out how to protect ancient monuments. The team wanted to see just how bad rising seas could get for Rapa Nui. So, they built a digital twin of the island and ran insanely detailed computer models to track waves along the shore. Then, they stacked those flood maps on top of data about all the cultural landmarks which they got thanks to local partners. They wanted to see which ones would get hit first. The results were pretty intense. Sea level rise is threatening coastlines everywhere, but the question now is when and how bad. The researchers' timeline shows that waves could crash all the way to Ahu Tongariki by 2080. That's the famous platform with the Moai statues, the heart of the island's culture. The data is clear and the clock is ticking. The island's people need to start planning now before the sea starts taking what's theirs. And Easter Island isn't the only potential disaster site suffering from the elements. The old city of Chanchan in Peru is feeling the heat from extreme weather. It used to be the capital of the Chimu Empire and is basically the biggest pre-Columbian city made out of earth in the Americas. The place was super advanced for its time. They had smart city planning, organized society, irrigation systems, and some amazing art. The Incas took over in the 1400s, but the ruins still show how sophisticated the Chimu were. It's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's really important. And now, El Niño, the warm phase of a natural climate cycle called El Niño Southern Oscillation, brings both heavy rains and long droughts to this place. These ups and downs have happened forever, but now they occur more often. Besides, rising groundwater is making the buildings unstable. To fight this, people are controlling the water table, fixing walls, documenting the architecture, training locals, raising awareness, and making disaster plans. Storms and shrinking sea areas are also causing problems for the 19th century whalers settlement on Herschel Island in Canada. It's so bad that buildings had to be moved inland to stay dry and avoid flooding. If erosion keeps going, locals might have to move them even more, and some structures are likely to be abandoned. Permafrost is also breaking down graves, which makes buried caskets topple and break. If we move to the mosque city of Bagarat in Bangladesh, we'll find that water and salty soil are wrecking stone buildings. Salt gets into the rocks and then expands when it gets wet. This causes the stones to crack and crumble faster. And this place is a UNESCO World Heritage Site too. It contains 360 mosques, public buildings, water tanks, mausoleums, bridges, roads, and other public buildings. People once constructed them from baked brick. Another place potentially in danger from rising seas and stronger waves is coastal Great Britain. There, weather conditions are threatening lots of historic castles. Hurst Castle in Hampshire, Tintagel in Cornwall, Peel Castle in Cumbria, Bayard's Cove Fort in Devon, Garrison Walls in the Isle of Scilly, and Kelshot Castle in Southampton all face danger. English Heritage says they need to fix walls and build stronger defenses to stop storm damage. Heavy rains and extreme weather are also hitting Edinburgh in Scotland. Flooding and landslides are a serious growing risk. Since 1970, annual rainfall has gone up 13%. The sandstone repeatedly gets wet and dries, which wears down Edinburgh Castle and erodes the volcanic rock it stands on. Is it going to topple one day? If nothing is done soon, time will show, I guess. Another super famous and touristy place that might get flooded soon is Venice in Italy. Its lagoon faces a serious threat from rising sea levels. Flooding is becoming more and more common. This puts the city's buildings and streets at risk. So, as you see, the problem of Rapa Nui aren't unique. Other coastal places like Hawaii face the same threat from rising seas. Ancient temples, sacred burial grounds, and other irreplaceable cultural sites are at risk, just like the moai and ceremonial platforms of Easter Island. The rising waters don't just threaten buildings, they put the history, traditions, and identity of entire communities in danger. Researchers are using data on coastal flooding to predict what could happen to Rapa Nui and other historical spots. They're mapping the risks, studying how seas will rise, and searching for ways to protect those precious places. The clock is ticking, and without action, some of the most sacred and ancient sites could be lost forever. Miami's luxury towers have everything: car elevators, rooftop pools, celebrity neighborhoods, and something completely unexpected called gradual descent. A new study shows dozens of beachfront high-rises are slowly sinking into the ground. Just a couple of inches over a few years and still moving. What's going on? And is it gonna get worse? Let's find out. When you look at a map of South Florida, the city of Miami is mostly on the mainland. Just off the coast lies a long barrier island. That's Miami Beach, the stretch you see in most drone shots and travel clips. Fancy cars, the beach, the clubs, the glass towers right next to the water, that's all on this island. But it didn't always look like that. For a long time, this area was mostly older hotels and simple apartment buildings. As prices went up and richer buyers started chasing ocean views, developers began knocking those down and putting luxury high-rises in their place. Floor by floor, that island turned into a narrow wall of glass facing the Atlantic Ocean. Now, here's the problem. Miami Beach sits only 4 to 5 feet above sea level. That's barely enough height for comfort. Each fall, king tides push water up through drains and across certain streets on bright, clear days. The flooding sometimes gets so bad that locals could kayak through parking lots for fun. That might sound like a funny video, but for researchers, it raised a serious question. Could the same landscape be shifting beneath the towers too? Some buildings had already shown signs of movement, and the question became whether the ground itself was still settling under all that concrete and steel. To find out, scientists used a method called INSAR, which stands for Interferometric Synthetic Aperture Radar. It works by having satellites scan the same spot on Earth over and over using radar to detect tiny changes in elevation. It's like watching a tower in slow motion from space, tracking whether it holds steady or slowly sinks. Those scans stack hundreds of satellite passes over the same balcony corners and roof edges. It's the same kind of radar NASA uses to track volcanoes and ground shifts. With enough images, researchers can spot motion as small as the thickness of a credit card. Between 2016 and 2023, they focused on this section of coastline from Sunny Isles to Miami Beach. The data showed that at least 35 high-rise buildings had moved downward over that period. In some cases, the ground had dropped just under an inch. In others, it was closer to 3. That may not seem like much, but over a short time, and in structures this heavy, it means something's off. These weren't new buildings under construction. Most were already finished, which makes the continued movement unusual. In theory, they should have settled and stopped, but they didn't. So what exactly is making the ground sink under these towers? Let's look underground. Specifically, right under these nice-looking buildings. Beneath the island is a mix of sand and Miami limestone. It is strong enough to build on, but it behaves more like hardened coral than solid mountain rock. Water moves through it, pressure moves through it, and sometimes the ground shifts in ways engineers can't properly predict. One possible explanation is something called creep deformation. It sounds like a villain from a B-movie, but it's actually a slow-motion rearranging of particles under constant pressure. Imagine parking a heavy truck on soft ground. It makes little dents right away, but if the truck stays there for a long time, those dents slowly get deeper. The ground keeps squishing a tiny bit at a time. That slow squishing is what might be happening under these buildings. But it's not just the weight. Construction itself can wake the ground up. Pile drivers, excavation, and heavy machinery can shake the sandy layers enough that older buildings nearby start shifting again. The study also found that some of the newer towers showed stronger movement overall, likely because the soil beneath them was still adjusting after recent construction. And then there's the water. The limestone underneath acts like a sponge, soaking up water from the ocean below and the rain above. When that water moves around, it quietly eats away at the rock and shifts the sand that holds everything up. That's how the ground slowly loosens. So, we have a spongy ground, heavy buildings, and the constant shaking from construction. Plus, water flowing through the rock. Over time, all of that adds up. It presses down just a little at first, then a little more. We're only talking inches, but even small uneven shifts can be enough to make engineers nervous. So, what does this mean for the buildings and all the people making social media reels? Probably, and hopefully, nothing. At least, not tomorrow. We're still far away from disaster movie scenarios. Structures won't topple over. There won't be sudden sinkholes swallowing cars. It's not how it works. But this problem does raise some eyebrows, especially after what happened just a few miles north in Surfside. In 2021, the Champlain Towers South partially collapsed. It was a huge tragedy that Miami will remember forever. That disaster didn't happen just because the ground moved. Issues kept piling up slowly over the years. Engineers discovered cracks, rust, and bad drainage. The building was falling apart from all sides, and then it was too late to do anything about it. But since then, the city has been paying more attention. Engineers are reassessing older buildings near the coast, and local officials are pushing for stricter inspections. The radar data doesn't mean a building is unsafe, but it can be an early warning. A signal that something deserves a closer look. For residents, though, there's a catch. Right now, there's no rule that says developers or building managers have to monitor ground movement with satellite scans. The study didn't involve teams going inside or taking core samples. It was just a space-based scan from above. If you zoom out from the sinking tower drama and look at that long strip of land, it's already one of the weirdest pieces of real estate on the planet. A good portion of the Miami lifestyle is literally fake land. Star Island, Palm, Hibiscus, the Venetian Chain, and a bunch of other spots started as sand at the bottom of Biscayne Bay. The bay was dredged in the 1920s. The sand was piled into islands, and developers turned those piles into celebrity neighborhoods where houses now cost tens of millions of dollars. Some of the richest people on Earth treat this area like their private game board. Fisher Island, just off South Beach, currently has the most expensive zip code in the United States, with a median listing price in the 8-figure range. A bit farther up sits Indian Creek, known as the Billionaire Bunker. It has only 41 houses, its own police force, and neighbors like Jeff Bezos and Tom Brady. One empty 1.8-acre lot there was recently listed for around $200 million, just for the dirt and the view. And all of this floats along the edge of Biscayne Bay, next to an actual national park full of beautiful marine creatures like dolphins, manatees, and sea turtles. More than 100 bottlenose dolphins live in and around the bay year-round, racing past boat docks and tall condos, like they're extras in someone else's movie. So, what happens next? Engineers keep scanning, inspectors keep checking, and everyone online keeps posting drone shots like nothing odd is happening under their feet. That's Miami, a strange blend of glamour and physics that never quite behaves. It's not a crisis, it's a maintenance routine. As long as the people in charge pay attention to quieter signals like slow dips in elevation or small structural changes, the skyline should hold. Maybe it settles a bit, maybe it stretches and groans. Now that engineers and scientists are aware of this issue, they can prepare and propose solutions. Until then, the towers will still be up and the bay will still shine bright. The whole city will keep drifting in its own style, just slightly downward. Greenland. You probably don't know very much about this land. In your mind, it's just somewhere far up north, freezing cold, sparsely populated, right? But how about a real tour? Not the kind filled with boring trivia about local landmarks or how beautiful the volcanoes and landscapes are. No. Today, you'll hear something that might actually make you want to visit this place. Ready? Let's go. A giant Greenland is moving. Right now, literally, if you ever wanted the slowest ride of your life on a giant piece of land, Greenland is the place. But how is that even possible? The thing is, Greenland isn't a continent, it's an island. The largest one in the world, by the way. And as you probably know, most of it is covered with ice. For centuries, this ice has been melting, and in recent decades, it's been melting even faster. As the ice thins and disappears, the entire island is deforming. And that deformation can affect the whole world. According to scientists, Greenland is shifting northwest at about 0.79 inches per year, while at the same time stretching in some areas and compressing in others. But why is this happening? There are three factors: the movement of tectonic plates, the melting of glaciers, and the most important one is glacial isostatic adjustment. Wait, what? It sounds complicated, but it's actually not. To understand it, lie down on your bed for a moment. Stay there, get up, and then look at the mattress. See the indentation left by your body? See how it slowly rises and smooths out again? That's glacial isostatic adjustment, but on the scale of your bedroom. The same thing happens to Earth's crust when an enormous mass of ice presses down on it. The ground isn't as rigid as it seems. It bends under pressure, and when that weight disappears, it slowly springs back up. The last ice age ended only about 11,700 years ago. Back then, massive slabs of ice more than 2 miles thick covered most of the northern hemisphere. Those glaciers have long melted, but the Earth is still rising, just like your mattress. Why so slowly? Because billions of tons of ice pushed down on the planet's surface for thousands of years. It takes a long time to recover from that. So, glacial isostatic adjustment is one of the main reasons Greenland is shifting and changing shape. You might not notice it with the naked eye, but from 2002 to 2025, its ice sheet has been losing about 264 gigatons of ice per year. To help you imagine how much that is, here's an example. 1 gigaton equals a billion tons. One blue whale weighs about 200 tons. That means 1 gigaton is the weight of 5 million blue whales. Now multiply those 5 million whales by 264. That's the amount of ice Greenland loses every single year. And of course, melting on such a scale doesn't come without consequences. The melting of Arctic and Greenland ice is reshaping our planet in serious ways. As ice disappears, less sunlight is reflected into space, trapping more heat and driving extreme weather worldwide. Rising sea levels threaten coastal cities and small island nations, while changing weather patterns disrupt agriculture, risking food security. Wildlife such as polar bears and seals lose critical habitats. The melting opens up new routes for ships. It sounds good, but imagine how much oil can be spilled on these routes in the event of shipwrecks. But are there any positive effects of melting glaciers? Actually, yes. New meadows, forests, and fertile areas could appear in places once buried under ice. Sure, this also increases methane emissions into the atmosphere, but let's not focus on the negatives for now. Oh, this is still a tour of Greenland, remember? So, why is a land covered almost entirely by ice and snow called Greenland? Simply put, it was a clever marketing trick by the Vikings. Greenland was founded by Eric the Red around year 982. He was a strong, hot-tempered Viking who had been exiled from his home in Iceland. He was the first to build a settlement on the island, and then began inviting other Europeans to join him. And to attract them, Eric the Red described the island as green and fertile, and even named it Greenland. In a way, he wasn't entirely lying. About 2.5 million years ago, the island really was green, but the marketing campaign didn't work as well as Eric probably hoped. Even today, Greenland remains one of the least populated places on Earth, with about 57,000 residents. Yes, it attracts tourists, but not even close to the number visiting Rome or Barcelona. So what's the coolest thing about this island? Transportation. Inside the towns, you'll find regular roads, but there are no highways connecting one town to another. And you won't find any railways either. In the capital, Newark, you can drive your car around, but if you want to travel to another town, like Kurortok, you need a snowmobile or a dog sled. There's always the option of taking a helicopter, but that can get expensive. The most popular mode of transportation here, though, is the boat. Isn't that amazing? While most of us are used to road trips and train rides, the people of Greenland regularly glide through icy waters surrounded by towering icebergs. If you don't like the cold, you can visit this place during the summer. In the southern part of the island, temperatures can reach 48 degrees Fahrenheit and even higher. but be prepared for sleep problems. From May 25th to July 25th, the sun doesn't set. Day and night, the sky stays bright, and that can definitely cause insomnia. On the other hand, you'll get to witness an incredible natural phenomenon, the midnight sun. And from September to April, you can see breathtaking northern lights. But if you're into mysteries and historical puzzles, you might want to explore one of the biggest enigmas tied to Greenland. It's the disappearance of the Vikings. As you know, Eric the Red founded a Viking settlement here. Around the year 985, Norse people sailed from Scandinavia and reached the southern coast of Greenland, where indigenous people, ancestors of modern Inuits, had already been living. Those locals were skilled hunters and fishers and were doing perfectly well. It's unclear whether they had huge battles with the newcomers or not, but there were local fights between them and the Vikings. So they lived here for about 500 years. They built houses, enjoyed views, made families, and developed a functioning community. And then, they abandoned the settlements. The only thing left behind were the ruins of their settlements. So, what happened to them? The popular explanation was Vikings failed to adapt to the climate. When they first arrived, the weather was warmer, but then temperatures began to drop dramatically. Vikings were fighters and traders by nature. They raided, they traveled, they bartered, but none of that mattered much in Greenland. Maybe they simply couldn't change their lifestyle and switched to fishing and hunting. However, this version has been rejected by many experts because archaeologists found remains of large Viking farms. Research shows that at least several thousand people lived here. The last written records about them date to letters from 1424. Everything seemed to be going just fine. It seems the Vikings tended animals and learned to handle the cold, but then something happened. In the 1700s, Protestant missionaries sailed from Norway to Greenland, but upon arriving, they found only Inuit people, not a single Viking. Recent studies propose a much more realistic theory of what happened. The disappearance of the Vikings coincides with the beginning of the Little Ice Age, a period during which temperatures dropped sharply in many parts of the world. This cooling caused sea levels around Greenland to rise. Wait, how can cooling cause sea levels to rise? Doesn't that usually happen during warming? Remember glacial isostatic adjustment? As the ice mass on Greenland grew heavier, it pressed the land downward. The coastline sank. The Vikings likely weren't prepared for the sudden cold and the flooding of their settlements. And so, they left. But of course, this is still just a hypothesis. What do you think happened? We've all thought about rewinding time, whether to fix that cringeworthy mistake or a sneak peek at next week's sports scores. But let's be real, those thoughts fade. For most of us, time travel is just a fun movie idea. But for astrophysicists, time travel isn't just sci-fi. It's a serious puzzle hidden in the fabric of space-time. And now, new models suggest the universe might just allow time to bend in ways that didn't seem possible. Humans were intrigued with manipulating time long before complex scientific models. In an ancient Hindu story, a king visits the heavens for minutes and returns centuries later. In a Japanese legend, a fisherman spends days in an underwater palace and comes back to find generations have passed. These are some of the myths that hint that time doesn't flow the same everywhere. And time traveling as a concept didn't just pop up from regret or curiosity, it also came from watching space. Time feels like one constant in our lives. It's always moving forward like a river. It flows forward and it's predictable. But when we zoom out, way outside of our planet, it's a different story. To physicists, time bends, stretches, and slows down depending on how fast you move or how strong the pull of gravity is. And that's not just a theory. It's measurable, proven, and built into the technology we use every day. For example, astronauts on the ISS orbit Earth at 17,000 miles per hour. And their clocks tick just a tiny bit more slowly than ours. It's only milliseconds, but technically, they've aged less. You can see this effect in your everyday GPS as well. Satellites up there feel less gravity, so their clocks tick a bit faster. Imagine playing a racing game where your car and your controller are a bit out of sync. That's why GPS needs constant tweaks, or else your phone would think you are miles away. Gravity also messes with time. Scientists proved it using 2 atomic clocks. Atomic clocks are like the ultimate devices that measure time. They don't tick with gears or crystals. They tick with atoms, the universe's own metronomes. One clock was on a skyscraper roof, the other closer to the ground. The lower one, feeling stronger gravity, ticked just a tad more slowly. The difference was tiny, but it proved that even height can tweak time. Now picture being near a black hole where minutes could equal years elsewhere. This might help you get those mind-bending scenes from Interstellar. So yes, time bends, and scientists know this. And the challenge now is learning how to do it on purpose. Einstein's work proved that time could move differently for different observers. The faster you move, the more slowly time passes for you. This phenomenon is called time dilation. Think of Marvel's comic Flash. He runs incredibly fast, but he doesn't really slow the world down. His own clock runs more slowly, so to him, everything else looks frozen. If you could reach the speed of light, your time would almost stop entirely, while the rest of the universe would keep racing ahead. For decades, physicists believed that was the only path to real time travel. But the Flash is a superhero, and Einstein proved that nothing with mass could reach that speed. The faster you go, the heavier you become, and the more energy it takes to keep accelerating. To actually reach light speed, you'd need infinite energy, because your mass would become infinite too. Since infinite energy doesn't exist in the universe, it's physically impossible. That's why physicists started asking questions like, if time can stretch and bend, could it also fold? In 1994, physicist Miguel Alcubierre posed a question. Could Einstein's math let us travel faster than light, not by breaking the rules, but by bending space itself? His answer was, maybe. He imagined a warp bubble, a region of space surrounding the ship that moves with it, carrying it along like a cosmic conveyor belt. In this bubble, the spaceship itself doesn't move. The space in front shrinks, the space behind stretches, and the ship rides the wave forward like a surfer gliding on a moving sea. Inside the bubble, the ship feels no motion. It's sitting still, but the bubble carries it across huge distances. And because the ship isn't moving through space faster than light, it doesn't break Einstein's rules. The universe itself does the moving. That hypothetical bubble would need a special kind of energy to bend space-time this way. Originally, Alcubierre's equations required negative energy or exotic matter, a substance that's never been found in usable amounts. Early estimates said we'd need more energy than Jupiter could provide. For years, scientists have wondered if the universe could allow something like a cosmic shortcut without breaking the known rules of physics. While nothing practical has been found yet, theorists have explored models that closed time-like curves, loops in space-time that bend back on themselves. Here's how it works. Imagine space-time as a giant sheet. Normally, moving across it takes time, like walking across a field. But a closed time-like curve is like drawing a circle on that sheet. If you walk along it, you could eventually end up back where you started. In space-time terms, the start and end could be different moments in time. So instead of just moving through space, you're following a path that loops through time, a theoretical shortcut to the past. This isn't pressing a button to hang out with your younger self, it's more like a time detour, a loop in the universe that could let something trace its way back to the past, all without breaking the speed of light. Einstein's math already lets space-time do gymnastics near spinning black holes, twisting like a cosmic corkscrew. Physicists can explore these loops on paper, but creating one in a lab is far beyond our reach. If one day we could turn this math into a real spaceship, a warp bubble wouldn't actually make the ship go faster than light. Well, technically there would be no speed. Inside the bubble, the ship wouldn't move at all. Instead, it would fold space like a piece of paper, bringing two faraway points together. The ship could get there in minutes while still obeying the cosmic rules. This is how it worked in the famous Star Trek series, and what many movies adopted as a method for space travel. In a hypothetical situation, a warp bubble wouldn't just be for spaceships. You could send a probe, a package, or even a cup of coffee across the galaxy without it actually moving through space. It's pretty cool, because since the bubbles move space around it, everything inside stays totally still relative to the bubble, which means no spills and no weird forces acting on the coffee. However, we are still far away from that point. The challenges we face are pretty massive. We still don't have enough energy, and folding space-time at will is still out of our reach. But for the first time, the math suggests that it's not impossible. What used to seem like pure sci-fi is now popping up in real science journals. These concepts aren't just about whipping up time machines or warp drives. Even if we never pull off a warp drive, figuring out how space-time works is a big deal for understanding reality. For now, it's all theory and simulations, but every experiment pushes the impossible line a little further. Yesterday it was no, today it's maybe. And in science, maybe is where the most exciting things happen. So while we're not ready to build time machines or bubbles across galaxies yet, scientists can now study and test these ideas using real physics, which will lead to new exciting discoveries. That is, unless future Earthlings figure out how to do it maybe 1,000 years from now, so they travel back in time to show us how we can do it ourselves. Which will create a grandfather paradox, unless someone sends the idea back in time and creates a closed time loop. There used to be a real oasis in the desert along the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. It was once the fourth largest lake in the world by area, 2 times as big as the entire country of Belgium. For thousands of years, it was home to freshwater fish and fed thousands of families who worked in the fishing industry. I'm talking about the Aral Sea. And now, it's all gone. Not dried a little bit, gone. The water retreated so far that ships now sit stranded in deserts, and their rusting hulls are half buried in sand. Villages that once relied on fishing now choke on dust storms made of salt and pesticide residue. It's like someone took the sea, crumpled it up, and tossed it into history. The worst part is that this wasn't a drought or some natural climate shift. This was all us humans. The land around the Aral Sea was always dry and harsh, but the sea held everything together. 2 great rivers fed it, and as long as they flowed freely, the Aral stayed steady. But then in the 1960s, the officials with big plans and even bigger ambitions decided to turn deserts into farmland and prove that human will could reshape nature itself. Engineers began siphoning water from both rivers for massive irrigation projects. By the time farmers were watering their parched fields, the Aral Sea was already bleeding out. Each canal carved from the rivers was like another cut. The flow weakened, the summers got hotter, and the water disappeared faster than anyone expected. And here's the tragic punchline. Those grand irrigation systems didn't even work properly. Somewhere between 25% and 75% of all the diverted water didn't reach the crops at all and just evaporated into thin air before it ever hit the soil. By the 1980s, both rivers were drying up completely in the hottest months. The Aral Sea's balance shattered, the water levels plummeted, and what remained became too salty for fish to survive. The once bustling fishing communities were wiped off the map. Within just 30 years, the massive inland lake had split into 2. In the early 2000s, Kazakhstan decided to fight back, or at least save what was left. They built the Koch-Aral Dike and Dam to trap the remaining water in the northern basin instead of letting it flow south and vanish. The northern part of the Aral Sea started to refill. Fish began to return, but the victory was only partial. To the south and east, the vast basin that once teemed with water and life kept fading away. By 2014, satellite images showed the eastern part completely dry, gone. For the first time in 600 years, the Aral Sea ceased to exist as a true sea. The salt from the exposed seabed of the Aral Sea poisoned farmland for miles, ruined water supplies, and spread lung and kidney disease across entire regions. The fishing towns lost everything, and that is the story we keep repeating. Over and over. We push, but then nature pushes back, even harder. There's another body of water with a tragic story a few thousand miles away. Lake Chad in Central Africa. Once, it was one of the largest lakes on Earth. Fishermen crossed it by boat, herders watered their animals, and entire economies depended on it. But it has shrunk by around 90% since the 1960s. How did it happen? Same pattern. Humans diverted its inflowing rivers for farming and irrigation. Again, for crops meant to make money fast. Combine that with some changes in climate conditions and a few decades of bad management, and poof. A lake the size of the entire country of Rwanda turned into cracked mudflats. The tragedy doesn't end with the water. When the lake vanished, livelihoods went with it. People started fighting over what was left: grazing land, wells, fish, and that tension helped fuel conflicts between 30 million people living in the region. Now, let's jump to 2023. You might have seen it in the news for a day or two, but then it vanished from the headlines. The city of Derna, Libya, is gone, washed away. There were 2 dams upstream from the city, both built in the 1970s. They were meant to control floods, back when people still maintained them. But then came years of conflicts, corruption, and neglect. Engineers knew that the dams were cracked, but nobody fixed them. Then, Storm Daniel hit. It was a monster of a storm, supercharged by a warming Mediterranean. The rain poured for hours, the reservoirs filled up, and those neglected dams just gave up. 2 walls of water went roaring through the valley in the middle of the night. It tore through Derna like a super powerful bulldozer. Entire neighborhoods were swept into the sea, and more than 10,000 people vanished in a single night. And probably the saddest part is that everyone knew this could happen. It was just a matter of when. If that sounds creepy and tragic, how about a horror movie set in real life? This is Centralia, Pennsylvania. Population 0, or close enough. It used to be a bustling coal town full of miners, families, diners, and little brick houses. Then one day in 1962, as the main theory says, someone decided to burn trash in an old pit. Nothing unusual, except that pit connected to a maze of coal tunnels underground. The fire spread down into the mines and it never stopped burning. Let me say that again. It's still burning. The ground itself is on fire. You can walk through Centralia today and see steam seeping out of cracks in the road, and the air is hot and metallic. The ground is unstable and it can just open up and swallow you. The authorities bought out the town in the 1980s, evacuated everyone, and bulldozed the houses. And yet, all of this was preventable. If anyone had sealed the mine shafts properly, monitored gas levels, or just taken the risk seriously, Centralia might still exist. Instead, it's a ghost town on fire. A literal warning that we don't always need nature to burn us. We can do it ourselves just fine. Another crazy thing humans have mastered is starting earthquakes. If you don't trust me, meet Pawnee, Oklahoma. On September 3, 2016, at 7:02 a.m., a 5.8 magnitude earthquake hit. The strongest ever recorded in the state. People's walls cracked, furniture toppled, and for a moment, Oklahoma felt like California. But Oklahoma isn't supposed to have earthquakes that big. So, what happened? The answer lies underground, in the wastewater disposal wells from fracking operations. When companies extract oil and gas using hydraulic fracturing, they pump millions of gallons of water and chemicals deep into the ground. The leftover fluid, contaminated and pressurized, has to go somewhere, so they inject it into deep wells. Those injections increase pressure along old fault lines and eventually snap. The Earth literally moves. It's not like anyone was surprised either. Scientists warned about it for years, Oklahoma went from averaging 2 noticeable earthquakes a year to more than 900 by 2015. And yet, permits for new wells kept rolling in. If there's one thread through all these stories, it's this: every disaster had a warning label. The RLC didn't dry up overnight. Derna's dams didn't crack in secret. Centralia's fires started with a match we lit. We saw it coming. We just didn't want to stop. And have you noticed how fire season doesn't really end anymore? California, Australia, Greece, take your pick. Wildfires are bigger, faster, and harder to stop every year. And no, it's not just the weather. Take a century of deforestation, mix in sprawling suburbs built right next to forests, and top it off with electrical lines and dry grass. You get a firestorm waiting for a spark, and that spark is usually human too. While some places are on fire, others are sinking, literally. In places like Indonesia, overpumping groundwater for cities and industries is making entire coastal areas sink. Jakarta, for example, is going down so fast it might become uninhabitable in a few decades. And yet, new buildings keep going up. Maybe it's greed. Maybe it's short-term thinking. Maybe we just believe nature will keep forgiving us. But one day, we'll realize forgiveness isn't infinite. Nearly 140 years ago, some fishermen pulled pieces of a ship from Lake Michigan. But where was the rest of it? From that moment on, hunters spent years searching for the ghost ship. By the 1970s, the hunt reached a new level. One with a $1,000 reward offered to anyone who could find it. Still, nothing. It was as if the vessel had simply vanished into thin air. That is, until now. Researchers have finally found the shipwreck off the coast of Bailey's Harbor, Wisconsin. The ship called the F.J. King disappeared back in 1886. At that time, this 140-foot-long vessel had a very important job: transporting grain. Now you might think, grain? Really? That's it? Okay, sure, it's not like the ship was loaded with tons of gold or jewels. But we have to see the bigger picture. At that time, Wisconsin was known as America's breadbasket. The state produced huge amounts of food, especially wheat. In fact, about 1/6 of the nation's wheat was being harvested there. Farming was booming, and that, of course, meant big money. The F.J. King was part of that golden era.
For about 19 years, it successfully carried and traded grain and iron ore through the Welland Canal. That is, until September 15, 1886. That day, the crew were on their journey to carry iron ore from Michigan to Chicago. It was supposed to be just another routine trip, but they were caught in a powerful storm. The conditions were brutal, with waves nearly 10 feet high. The crew fought desperately to get the water out and keep the ship afloat, but the waves were too strong. They kept coming, one after another. The men worked hard until they couldn't go on anymore. The waves were splitting the ship's seams. At this point, a catastrophe was inevitable. So Captain William Griffin gave the order: abandon ship. They had no choice but to get out. The men grabbed their belongings as fast as they could and climbed into the ship's small yawl boat. It was 2 a.m. Everything around them was dark. As they tried to get closer to shore, the F.J. King went down, bow first. And then suddenly, boom! The crew watched in shock as the ship's stern deckhouse blew off, sending the captain's papers 50 feet into the air. They stayed in the small boat until they were picked up by a passing schooner called La Petite. The crew took them to Bailey's Harbor, and moments later, Captain Griffin filed a wreck report. That's when the real mystery began. In his report, the captain said the ship had gone down about 5 miles off the shore of Lake Michigan. But that was just what he thought. I mean, it wasn't based on any instruments, readings, or anything like that. It was just what he remembered from that night. A week later, though, a local lighthouse keeper spotted the masts of a schooner sticking out of the water, much closer to shore. He reported it to a nearby newspaper, and that's when people really started asking questions. Could that be the F.J. King? Even though they had a solid lead, it didn't take them anywhere. No one could find the boat. Days passed, then months, then years, until 2025. That's when an investigator named Brendan Baylod decided enough was enough. He gathered a team of about 20 scientists and historians to finally track down this historic shipwreck. They dug through hundreds of original documents about the ship and the day it went down, piecing together clues and narrowing down the area where it might be. Many experts were like, "Man, just let it go." And to be fair, they had every reason to feel discouraged. After all, that whole area had already been searched over and over. There was just no way the ship could still be out there. But Bayod didn't give up. Okay, truth is, he also thought it was a long shot. But working to find the ghost ship had other perks. His team wanted to get some hands-on experience with a brand new super advanced sonar. With that in mind, they set out on their mission, heading to Lake Michigan on June 28th. Okay, great. But where do you even start? First, Bayod had to clear something up. Back when the wreck happened, who was actually telling the truth about the ship's location? The captain or the lighthouse keeper? Getting that answer would point them in the right direction. Then, Bayod thought about something that might have already crossed your mind. How could the captain really know where they were? It was pitch black. He'd just been struggling to keep his ship afloat. He couldn't see much. He was exhausted and probably hungry. He definitely wasn't thinking straight. That's when the investigator realized the lighthouse keeper's directions were probably more accurate. Thankfully, he found the newspaper article from 1886. You know, the one I mentioned earlier, where the lighthouse keeper gave a more specific detail about where he'd last seen the ship's masts. What the investigator did next was draw a 2-square-mile grid around that location, and the team decided to map the lake bottom inside that grid using their fancy tech. So, there they were, aboard the Shoreline, a tour boat that usually carries sightseers along the peninsula. But that day, they didn't really expect to find anything. Their only goal that afternoon was to test their new side-scan sonar, one with much greater capability than the previous model the crew had been using. But then, after about 2 hours of searching, something strange happened. The sonar was sending out sound waves to map the dark floor of Lake Michigan when it started to act a little differently. And as the images began to stitch together, they revealed a shape that was impossible to mistake. A ship. Bingo. They'd found it. Turns out the wreck was less than half a mile from where the lighthouse keeper had said it would be. At this point, some of the crew had to pinch each other. They couldn't believe their eyes. They were shocked, not only because they'd found the ship so quickly, but also because of how well it was preserved. You see, the investigators were hopeful, but they also thought the ship would be shattered into pieces. After all, it had been carrying iron ore, and the weight of all that metal could have torn it apart even more. But no. To everyone's surprise, the hull was almost completely intact. Sure, the front right side was crushed, but the rest of it was pretty much there. The investigators even found the crew's belongings and kitchenware scattered across the lake bottom. Once they got over the shock, they called in archaeologists to examine the site and create a 3-dimensional model of the wreck. This is the 5th major shipwreck Bayod and his team have found in the last 3 years. But the truth is, this region is full of mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. The F.J. King is just one of around 6,000 ships that were damaged or destroyed in incidents across the Great Lakes during the 1800s. And it's estimated that hundreds of these wrecks still remain hidden at the bottom of Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. Thankfully, discoveries like this one could become more and more common. In fact, more shipwrecks are being found today than at any other time in history. Advances in technology have made scanning the lake floor less expensive and more accessible, not just for professionals, but for amateurs too. And the profile of these modern-day shipwreck hunters has changed. Now, they're more often searching for wrecks for their historical value, not just to find treasure. Another project that could help uncover even more wrecks in the Great Lakes is called Lakebed 2030. It could change everything, as its goal is to map the entire lake floor. And right now, only about 15% has been explored. That means the Great Lakes might still be hiding their biggest secrets, and that, at the very least, is super exciting.